My name is Karla Lanzas Rojas, and I am a mathematics professor here at Sacramento City College. I'm originally from Jinotega, Nicaragua, so I was born in Nicaragua. During that time period, my father was working with the Sandinistas, so he was drafted into the Sandinistas war and realized that he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. We left Nicaragua in around November, and we didn't reach the United States until I believe it was September of the following year. I was 2.5 when I left. We hired a coyote that crossed us through multiple borders, and we ended up having the hardest difficulty in Mexico. And my mom said by the time we got to Mexico, because of trekking all the other borders prior to that, she goes, that vestido celeste you had, she goes, it was brown. Like, it was just so dirty. But I think about what my mom endured, and now having a 2-year-old daughter, I could not fathom going through all of that with my daughter. When we were detained in Mexico, she mentioned that, like, of course my dress was fully brown, it was dirty, it was disgusting, and all I would do was cry. I would just cry and cry, and the soldados were like, ya cállala, and my mom's like, well, I can't, she's hungry, quiere leche, quiere, she wants to drink something, but they wouldn't give her anything. And so my mom says that, and this part still like breaks my heart to even like imagine it. She said that I would lean over and I would drink water from the ground, dirty, puddled water in a cell in Mexico. And this is how I was attempting to be hydrated. But even more than that, like, she was like, I left Nicaragua with one pañal. And so my mom would go in the rivers and stuff throughout the trek, and she would wash them and then put it back on me. And so now being detained, she was like washing it in dirty water and putting on this like dirty pañal on me, right? I mean, the good news, I was telling my mom, like, well, I broke you out of jail, right? Because the soldados just couldn't, they just couldn't deal with it anymore. I was just crying way too much. I was, insoportable. And so they let us go. And then my dad, being over here in California, with my tia, hired another coyote to get us over the rest of the trek. And in hiring another coyote, they're like, okay, well, tenemos que pasar el río, right? So we have to go through the river. And I honestly think this is the reason why my mom has the biggest fear of swimming now. They put her in a tire, right, as a flotation, and the coyote was like leading her. And while my mom was sitting on this tire, they put me on her shoulders. And they said, okay, well, like, hold on to your daughter. We're going to get you guys across, right? But in doing that, here comes una ola and, like, just takes me off her shoulders. And now I'm floating down the river. And the coyote looked my mom dead in the eye and told her, olvídate de tu hija. Consider her dead. We have to keep going. And my mom is just staring at me like, that's my hija. Like, how do you want me to, like, forget about her? And he just kept going. And I mean, obviously I'm alive because I'm here. But what happened was that down the river, there were other immigrantes that were also going through this. They grabbed me, and they picked me up, and then they tossed me like a ball to the other side. And my mom said that that's all she saw. She just saw a bola just going to the other side. And she's like, if she didn't drown, she's for sure dead now. And so she ran over to me once she made it to the other side, and she grabbed me by the legs, and she said I was blue and everything. All she could think to do was shake me. She was just like kept shaking me until I started crying again. So, and that's how we crossed. We finally made it to my family on this side that was here in California, but it took us a really long time to actually become legal, to get paperwork. And even then, I feel like we were very, very fortunate. So we at the time we came here, we lived in California for a while. We went straight to Richmond, California, about 30 minutes east of San Francisco. It was tough. We lived in a bedroom in my tia's house, the three of us, and then my mom had two other daughters, so there's three of us now, and we were all crammed into this one bedroom in my tia's house until I thought this was so interesting because I didn't find this out until way later. My dad had suffered a severe back injury, and the doctors told my dad, sorry, not me, but told my dad that he needed to seek warmer weather because it was too cold, and so his back was obviously going to keep flaring up. And he couldn't work. So my dad was working as a plumber at the time, or a construction worker, or anything he could do. So with that pretense, my dad left us again for a full year, and he left to Florida. After a year of actually kind of being somewhat established there, he came back and took all of us down. And so I spent a good part of my childhood. What I didn't realize until recently, and I mean like within the last couple of months, was that one of the biggest reasons my father left California is because they had served him with deportation papers. So we left to Florida basically trying to avoid, my dad was avoiding deportation, because the moment my father got deported, that meant that my mother was probably going to get deported and I was probably going to get deported. And in that move, I was 5 years old at the time, and my sisters, I had a sister that was a couple of months old. I had, I think she was about a 1-year-old, and my other sister was 2. And we packed in this little Nissan Sentra hatchback. That was it. That was all of our stuff. And we drove a full week to get to Florida. And we got stopped by immigration in Texas. Immigration, they stop us and they say, hey, like, where's your paperwork? Kind of ordeal. And my dad, they asked him if he was legal and if he had papers. And my dad's like, yeah, of course I do. He's like, but, they're in the trailer thing, on top. So he's like, so I need to pull over and search for them. And at the time, like, my dad didn't have anything. In fact, what he did have was a deportation notice. At the time, though, both my sisters were crying. They were just nonstop, unsupportably crying. And the officer just looked at my dad. He said, don't worry about it. Keep going. I mean, that's lucky. Like, I think that's super lucky to have that happen. Because if not, it would have been the three of us. And my sisters would have been here by themselves. So I know what it felt like to not have a social security number, because I didn't even know what that was. Right. I just remember they asked for it at school, and I'm like, I don't know. When I got to Florida, I actually ended up getting held back a full year because they told me that California standards aren't the same as Florida standards, and I was too far behind and I needed to repeat kindergarten. So I repeated kindergarten out of all grade levels. I didn't know what it was like to not be included, because I was surrounded by Cubanos, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, It was almost very normal to, and I excelled, well, sort of. I excelled in some subjects. I realized that at the end of first grade that I totally played the system and I passed first grade. And I got caught in second grade, and I still remember her name. Her name is Miss Fudge. Miss Fudge stops me one day and she told me, Karla, she's like, you don't know how to read. And I said, yes, I do. And she goes, read this to me. And I struggled. I faked it in first grade, and here I am halfway through second grade and I can't read a word. And so at home, I mean, obviously I don't really have very much support in English because my mom didn't speak any English. My dad was very broken English. And I still remember that I would come home with this dreaded vocabulary list, and I had to write these sentences that use the word in a sentence. And I remember I would sit there on the sofa and just cry. And then my mom would always tell me, she's like, Karla, she's like, ve acuéstate. She's like, I'll wake you up when your dad gets home. My dad get home like 11, 12 o'clock, and I'd get woken up, and I'd sit there with my dad at the table trying to with a dictionary, trying to figure out what these words mean and writing them in sentences. And so I just dreaded it fully. My second grade teacher caught on. She figured it out. And she said, Karla, I want you to stay after school every single day with me. Okay, but I have to talk to my mom and my dad and all of this. And so I told my mom, I was like, me va a ayudar la maestra, she's going to try to teach me to read. And She did. What she did that was even more amazing, I think, is that in one of the conversations that we had, she found out my mom didn't work, that she was trying to find work. And she goes, does your mom clean houses? And I was like, yeah, that's actually what she does. And she goes, why don't you tell your mom to give me a call and she can come and clean my house? And my mom started cleaning my second grade teacher's house, not because my second grade teacher needed it, but purely out of the fact that this woman saw me as more than a student in her class. She saw the whole me. And so she provided financial stability to some point, But she taught me how to read. And then moving on from there, then I started to somewhat excel because I got into like reading levels were okay and the math levels were fine. When I got into middle school, like I was taking like advanced English and I was taking advanced math. And so everyone in my classes, like everyone looked different. Not everybody looked the same. And I think when I hit the biggest culture shock was when I moved back to California. So freshman year, I remember I crossed the country and out of all places, I ended up in Livermore, California. There was 10 Latino students in the entire school. And there was 2 black kids in the entire school. I remember I walked in and I was supposed to start freshman year in Algebra 2. I was supposed to be in honors English and things like this. And I still remember the first day of English class. I walk in and I'm like, oh, this is a small class. I'm like, that makes sense. It's honors English. And then the teacher on the board writes up verb. And then she says, a verb is an action word, like jump, run. And I'm sitting there like, I went to her after class and I said, this isn't honors English, is it? And she looked at me, she goes, honey, this isn't even regular English, this is remedial. I was like, there's a mistake. I was like, I don't understand why I'm in this class. And then the same thing happened in math. I was placed in remedial math. I went to the administration and I told them, I was like, excuse me, like, what happened? Like, you have my transcripts. And they said, oh, but you took like middle school subjects. Like, those don't count for high school. I had to actually jump some hoops and I had to contact all of my previous instructors and have them write letters saying that, like, yes, in fact, I'm supposed to be in these, like, advanced classes. So it was really weird because I was like, I've never experienced that at all. And here I was like, oh, wait, you're not good enough to be in these classes. And even then, like, once I was in the classes, my honors English teacher, one day, I missed class for some reason. I was making up a quiz. And she was talking to another student, helping him with an essay. And I was not even a part of the conversation. I was sitting here taking my quiz. And she told the student, oh, you're just like Karla. It's okay if you don't write English well because your first language is Spanish. And I remember sitting there like, wait, what? What does my first language have to do anything with my ability to write? And I just remember sitting there thinking like, who are you to tell me what I can and I cannot do? And even more than that, I'm the only Latina in your class. And then you're telling me that I don't write well because I speak Spanish? But then, I didn't have an A in her class, but I do remember I had a really high B. And I was like, because I'm still outperforming half of her American students or her white students, so what's their excuse? That year was the first time I think it hit me in the face, like, oh, this is what discrimination looks like. And this is what it feels like. Because I wasn't used to that before. It's interesting because I never once in my mind doubted I was going to go to college. And I think part of that, I have to give mad props to my dad because he was just like, hey, les traje pa estudiar. Like, I want you guys to have every single resource I didn't have. And so I knew I was going to go to college. To study what? I don't know. I remember that, because then I moved again and I moved to the East Bay area. So I ended up graduating from Deer Valley High School in Antioch, California, which is like far east Bay Area. And so there we had a little bit more diversity, right? There were still some microaggressions that now I think about and I'm like, oh, that didn't register back then. But I was always still college bound. Originally, I thought about studying law and I wanted to go into college and be a lawyer, predominantly for agricultural workers to help them, right, to give them their rights. And then I thought about child development. I was like, maybe I'll be a child development major because at the time I was like, that seems easy. I don't know what it was. All of a sudden there was this fear of pursuing anything that wasn't easy. But that's what I did. I ended up doing child development. And I had friends that were going into engineering, but I didn't know what engineering was. And now I think back, when I look at things from a professor's perspective, I try to make sure students understand kind of what those options are. Because I think that predominantly, if you're coming from a household that's never been to college, and people are like, oh yeah, you should study engineering. It's like, well, what is that? Like, what does it mean to be an engineer? I knew then what I know now about engineering. Maybe I would have been an engineer, I don't know. But I would have had more options to make those choices. And I think that coming from like a house that's never been to college, has never even navigated the US educational system, it's really hard to be able to say like, oh, this is the career I want, or these are the classes that I need, because by no means did I know any of that. I didn't know very much about scholarships. I did apply for some. I did take my PSATs and things like that because teachers told me, but not because I knew to do that at home. And I was fully gonna be, I wanted to go straight to college. I felt like, no, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be the first one that doesn't go to community college. Because I had 2 cousins that went to community college, and unfortunately it wasn't in the cards for me. I was gonna go to San Diego State. I fell in love with that campus. I was like, oh, this is where I'm going, and I'm gonna study child development. I remember going down, and we visited it with with my family. And my dad tells me after we visited the campus, which he absolutely loved, he's like, Karla, he's like, we can't afford this. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was just deflated. It's like, oh, even though I have the grades and even though I can go there, I can't. So I ended up going to community college. A couple years later, I got my got my master's at San Francisco State University. All of it with loans that I'm still paying off today. If we want to take advantages of all the resources that are here on campus, we as students need to take the initiative, right? We need to go introduce ourselves. I highly recommend that students do that they step outside of their comfort box and go try to make a dialogue with any of their professors. I can't stress enough, office hours, math lab, right? Ensuring that you have the right resources and the right tutoring, right? You have programs like SESI, which provides the tutors, right? You have the math lab that has tutors, RISE, you have SAGE, you have, the Beacon tutors, the LRC tutors, right? And really just finding someone, at least, that can help you out. We can't succeed by ourselves. That's a lie if we ever told anybody that we did it all by ourselves. Because somewhere somebody had to help you. And I can't stress enough that I would not be sitting here with 2 degrees under my belt if I thought that I did it by myself, because I absolutely didn't. Study groups are important, right? Finding people that are in your classes that can just meet up and struggle. I mean, struggle together, that's fine. But you have to struggle with someone. Like, you can't do it on your own.